My name is Linda Snetzler, and in the Office of Outreach and Engagement, which is where I work in the Provost's office, I've had the wonderful opportunity of working with Chuck Swanson on a variety of projects. And he's just been a wonderful ally, a terrific colleague, and some of my most enjoyable experiences in the office have been in work that I've done with him and the incredible projects that he brings to our state. So I want to tell you just a little bit about him. His passion for Hancher, which is truly a passion, began the year that it opened in 1972. Chuck was a student at the University of Iowa at the time. His career at Hancher began in 1985 when he accepted the position as business manager of the auditorium. And then he went on in 2002 to become the executive director. So during his 30 years at Hancher, Chuck has led many major projects, and probably one of the most famous is the tour by the Joffrey Ballet in 2007, and that was as a celebration of the 35th anniversary of Hancher. He's developed many statewide partnerships over the years, and in the past 5 years, one of his major projects has been that of the new Hancher, and it's this incredible place, which I think is probably one of the most beautiful in the entire country. And his work there, I think, is so important because we will soon be able to experience Hancher firsthand. Chuck and his wife, Kim, have 3 daughters, and all of them graduated from the University of Iowa. And he has 2 grandchildren, and he is about to become a grandfather for the 3rd time. And what I would like to say now is please join us in welcoming Chuck.
Thank you, Linda. Thanks a lot. Well, Linda, thank you very, very much. I am going to echo her comments back to her, is that I always love working with Linda. And I got to say that she has this talent of hiring the best people because her staff is amazing to work with. I want to thank Erica, Haley, and Jade, because every time I work with that office, they're wonderful people. So thanks again to all of you. As Linda said, this summer I celebrated 30 years at Hancher. I can't believe it, but I do think that shows that when you're having fun, time goes pretty fast. I believe that I've got the best job on campus, and my new boss is here today, Pete Mathis, which I told Pete that puts some pressure on a little bit, but I have to say that I'm very, very happy to now be reporting to Pete, and I'm also reporting to his wife, Ann, because Ann is president of our guild. So thank you, Pete and Ann, for for being here. Excuse me. But as Linda said, my relationship with Hancher goes way back to 1972. I was here when Hancher opened. I was a student, and I actually lived right across the river. This buddy of mine, I think most of you know or have heard of Chuck Peters. He and I toured the building even before it was open. And I know today, if Dennis Jordan is here with Mortensen, I know today I would be in trouble if I didn't have a guide looking through the building. But Chuck and I had so much fun. And I'll never forget that opening season. It was really Rudolf Nureyev with the National Ballet of Canada, Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and the night that Music Man performed and they announced that Meredith Willson was in the audience. That was very, very exciting. And so during my time as a student, I embraced Hancher and I went to Hancher often. And I always read the Daily Iowan, and I'll never forget at the opening, they talked so much about Hancher. And they talked about this special place, but yet nobody knew much about Hancher. And I think about when we open in September of 2016, the new Hancher, I think about all the relationships, the national reputation, the international reputation, and I think we all have a great, great time ahead of us. So, Virgil Hancher. I also feel honored today because Susan Boyd is in the audience, and I have heard so many stories about President Hancher, but I never knew him But he was he was our 13th president of the university and president from 1940 to I think 1964. And from President Boyd, I've heard a lot of stories about President Hancher, and also stories about his wife Susan. And Mary Sue Hockmuth is the daughter of President Hancher, and she lives here in town, so she's told me stories. And he grew up in Rolfe, Iowa. He grew up on a hog farm, and I've got a lot of Spencer friends here today, so they can relate to Rolfe, Iowa. But he had this vision, this dream, that he wanted Hancher, or he wanted the arts to be available to as many people as possible, and especially students. And he never lived to see Hancher open, but I feel so proud because our vision is that Hancher strives to enrich the life of every Iowan through transformative artistic experiences, and I feel like at least we're fulfilling his dream, and that really makes me happy. So our mission, Hancher's mission, I always say, is right in line with the mission of the University of Iowa. We bring world-class artists, as you can see from this, a broad range of the performing arts: dance, music, theater, and within each one of the genres, we also have a broad range. And let me tell you, we're going to get back to presenting Broadway, orchestras, and major dance companies. But our mission, as I said, is right in line with the mission of the University of Iowa. We bring these world-class artists to the university, and we engage them in learning, discovery, and public engagement. And that's right in line with the three prongs of the university. So President Kennedy said, "I look forward to an America which will steadily raise the standards of artistic opportunities and which will steadily enlarge cultural opportunities for all of our citizens." I'm sure Jackie had a little bit to do with that because I know she loved the performing arts. But I feel too that we are right in line with what President Kennedy really wanted for our country. In creating opportunities, I want to first of all talk about University of Iowa students. President Sandy Boyd always says, and I love this quote, he always says that Hancher is the largest classroom on campus. And we are part of a university, and so it's important that we not only present performances, but that we encourage and we look for artists who are not only good at their craft on stage, but artists that are good in getting into communities and great at working with students across campus. So this is a project, and today I'm going to talk about projects. I'm also going to talk about stories. I love stories. And so this was back in a grant that we received in 2008. This was a grant from the Doris Duke Foundation, and it was called the Creative Campus Program. And I think there were a couple hundred universities that applied for this project or this program through the Creative Campus Program, and we were one of 6 that received a grant. And we put together a project called Eyepiece. It was actually a partnership with Hancher, the Center for Macular Degeneration. Ed Stone is a great friend, and the University of Iowa Theater Department, students from the theater department. And we brought Rindy Eckert. Rindy Eckert is an artist. He actually graduated from the School of Music, and Rindy he's in New York, he's an actor, he's a writer, he's a playwright, he's a singer. He's won numerous awards. Rindy is really very, very talented. And so he was at the university for about 6 weeks in residence, and he spent time working over at the Center for Macular Degeneration, interviewing doctors, medical students, patients, family members, and then he wrote a play based on his interviews, and he cast the play with students from the University of Iowa Theater Department. And our whole goal with this was we wanted to create more compassion in doctors when dealing with patients who are losing their sight. And the play was fabulous. It was awesome. I remember Doris Duke loved it so much they gave us more funding, and the doctors and the medical students over at the Center for Macular Degeneration, they loved it. And they said that they had never seen a play that so articulately used the medical terminology and that also portrayed the blind person in the right way. But more than anything, what I really enjoyed is we interviewed students afterwards. And students talked about students who were in the play, cast in the play, and they talked about the fact that they really felt like being in the play, they could understand the world of a person with disabilities. And they said they would leave this university as a different person because of this experience. Another project that we did across campus, this is really kind of a favorite one of mine. This was a project with Hubbard Street 2. And this was in 2011. I never can remember the years anymore. But this was every year, Hubbard Street 2 does what they call a choreographers competition. And they bring in a young aspiring choreographer. And they have that choreographer set a dance on the Hubbard Street 2 dancers. They're the younger dance company of Hubbard Street. And so we invited them to come to the University of Iowa for a year, or for 3 weeks in one of our seasons. And we wanted them to set the dance also on the Hubbard Street 2 dancers, also on University of Iowa students at Halsey Hall. And the choreographer of choice that year his name was Calibia. He was from Brazil, and he'd never been to the United States ever before. And so Taryn Russell is the director, she's left now, but she was the director of Hubbard Street 2. And she was really quite a businesswoman and really quite a entrepreneur, to be honest. Hubbard Street 2, or Hubbard Street the dance company, was really facing financial problems. And so Hubbard Street 2 was she was concerned about that company still being a part of Hubbard Street. And so she had to find some way to support Hubbard Street 2. So she started to think in terms of this is a modern dance company, and she thought there's no young audience performance from a modern dance company in the country. And so she got funding and help from the Kennedy Center, and she created a dance on Harold and the Purple Crayon, if you've read that book to your kids before. And it ended up being very successful, ended up generating revenue to support Hubbard Street 2. So I talked to David Hensley. I said, David, all of your students in the entrepreneurial classes, they're really creative, they're smart, they're concerned about time, they're risk takers. I said, how about if Taryn, when she's here, she's going to be here for 3 weeks, how about if she spends time working with your students, lecturing to your students while she's here creating this dance? And first of all, he looked at me, he said, Chuck, our students are not that creative. He said they could use something like that. And so she went and she lectured several times during those 3 weeks, and I heard from so many of the professors how wonderful that was, and they said they'd never had any experience like that before. And I think she encouraged a lot of the students to come to the performance too, which was great. So Healing Wars, this is another example of our creative campus efforts. This was a project, Liz Lerman, she's a choreographer, and she's really in the choreography world. She's very well known for doing a lot of research. She kind of puts dance and science together. And so she created this piece called Healing Wars that really looks back at the Civil War and brings the issues of the Civil War to our current wars, all the themes, and shows how wars really in a lot of ways generate a lot more interest in the medical field. But her focus was really on women in the Civil War. And so we ended up there again bringing a lot of classes together. It was, I think, the College of Social Work, the History Department, the Nursing, College of Nursing, rhetoric classes, and of course dance, music, and theater. And the students, together with our staff, they created a pop-up museum over at the Commons area of the library. And it was all these exhibits about the Civil War. There was dance, there was theater, there were audio exhibits, there were visual exhibits. But the best part of this is students really learned the creative approach. They had to really be creative to think about these exhibits. And then students from all over campus worked together, which we truly loved. When you think about Hancher 2, we're excited. Students on stage. Of course, we haven't been able to do that for the last 8 years. But the new Hancher, we inherit the scene shop, the costume shop from the School of Music, so we know that students are going to be performing on that new stage. And then $10 tickets. We really want to make as many performances and as many experiences possible for students. And I think $10 a ticket, that's a pretty good bargain on campus. And then student employees. I think about the number of students who have worked at Hancher. They come back and they talk about that Hancher experience. And also it creates a community. Sometimes you think about the University of Iowa and you think about it's a big place. And you think these students come and they feel a part of Hancher. They feel a part of the university. And then it helps to launch them when they get their real job. So, as I said, I love to tell stories. I want to tell one story about the impact of students in Hancher. So I talked to the College of Nursing during Phil Week. And after my presentation, this woman came up and she said, you know, I was a student at the University of Iowa back in 1982. And she said, I lived in Burge. And she said, I was one of those nervous freshmen, you know, nervous tummy and all these friends, you know, or potential friends. You always want to come to college and make your best friend ever. So she said, we're, you know, all sitting on the Burge Hall one night and somebody said, let's look at this Hancher brochure. Let's go to a Hancher performance. And so she said, you know, well, I was a real rock and roller. And she said, that's what all these, you know, my friends, that's what all they liked is rock and roll. And so we looked through the brochure and we saw this performance by somebody named Ella Fitzgerald. And she said, you know, well, we decided we're going to, you know, take a chance. We're going to go to this performance. And she said, obviously, Chuck, that transformed my life. She said that, first of all, I learned that there's other music besides rock and roll. She said that several of us became good friends. I always feel like a common, wonderful, unusual experience draws people together. And she said, I own every Ella Fitzgerald CD you can buy. So I love that story. So K through 12th graders, we certainly have an impact on K through 12 in our community, in our region, and throughout the state. And this is a quote from Isaac Stern: our greatest single source of wealth is in the minds and talent of our young people. And you know, of course, Isaac Stern has performed at Hancher years ago. He's no longer with us, but you think about that, and that is right in line with what Hancher values, because to me, one of the things that I'm looking forward to with that building more than anything is creating experiences that transform the lives of young people. So you've all heard of this art in public spaces. When you open a new Hancher, you have to purchase art. And so I was on the committee. You know, I know performing arts, I don't know visual arts as well, but I said to the group, I said, you know, I would love to have a piece of art in the new Hancher that really reflects the work that we do and that really reflects our statewide approach. And so the committee said, well, tell us a little more. And so we finally commissioned Anita Jung. She's from the, how many of you know Anita? She's from the School of Art and Art History. She's an amazing woman. And so we connected with 7 communities across the state and 7th graders. They're now 8th graders because this happened last year. And so I want to show this video.
Hancher Auditorium at the University of Iowa is a place where great artists share their work with great audiences. We want you to be our next great artist. We're inviting 7th graders from 7 Iowa communities to help Anita Young, an artist who teaches at the University of Iowa, create a new work that will be permanently displayed at the new Hancher Auditorium. The auditorium is currently under construction on the University of Iowa campus in Iowa City. The 7 communities are Algona, Council Bluffs, Iowa City, Maquoketa, Muscatine, Spencer, and Storm Lake. We'll tell you more about the project in just a minute. But first, let me tell you a little bit more about Hancher. Hancher has been connecting artists and audiences since 1972. Many wonderful performances have happened on the Hancher stage over the years. In 2008, the original Hancher Auditorium was destroyed by flooding. But that didn't slow us down. We continued to present artists in Iowa City and all across the state of Iowa, in your community, and many, many others. In 2016, a brand new Hancher Auditorium will open. That's where your art will be on display. Here's how the project works. First, you'll take a selfie. That's right, it won't just be your art. You'll actually be part of the project. Once you have your selfie, you'll trace it onto a sheet of paper. Then, you'll write a short description of what performance means to you. Once you've written it, you'll write those words on the lines of your outlined selfie. Don't worry, your art teacher will help you if you have any questions. Once your artwork is done, your art teacher will send it to Anita Young. She'll select many of the student works to be part of the piece of art that will hang in the new Hancher Auditorium. Pretty cool, huh? Before we go, here are a few amazing facts about Hancher and the new auditorium. The new Hancher Auditorium will have about 1,800 seats. That's a lot, but Hancher is committed to connecting with many, many more people all across the state of Iowa. The new building includes 10 million pounds of structural steel to form the skeleton of the building and hold it up. The new building also includes 80 million pounds of concrete. That's enough to fill an entire football field at the depth of 10 feet. You might be wondering why we think the arts are so important, that we're building a huge new building for them. Well, we believe that the arts make life better. They help us explore our own creativity, solve problems, and come together as a community. And, of course, the arts are fun, just like this project. Everyone at Hancher is excited to see what performance means to you. And we can't wait to share your art with everyone who comes to the new Hancher Auditorium. We hope you and your family will come to Hancher to see your art and a show when the new auditorium opens. And who knows, maybe in a few years, you'll be a student at the University of Iowa. When you come to Hancher Auditorium with your friends, you'll be able to show them your art and remember how you contributed to an amazing new place for artists and audiences. We look forward to seeing your art and seeing you at Hancher Auditorium.
And we showed this video, and you can tell this video is geared towards the young people. And so we don't want them to forget. So this year, we just got back, or I got back, it was the first week in November, went to the 7 communities, and we brought the Out of Bounds play, the play about cyberbullying, because I want to remind these kids about what they've done and remind them about Hancher. And so we presented the play 13 times in a week, and we had reached 4,000 students. And at every one of the performances, we had these students stand up who were involved in the art piece. And now in February, we're going to take a magician around the state, Kevin Spencer, he's so transformed. He's just an amazing guy. And he's going to help us get these kids involved in naming the piece. So, and then my hope is that a lot of these kids, when we open the hall and we have an opening of Anita's piece, that a lot of these students can be bussed in and be a part of the excitement. My Spencer friends, I put this in there for you, is that when we brought Out of Bounds, what Working Group Theater, who created the play, what they did is they left a charge after every one of the plays, and they said, I want you to do one small thing to all the students, and I want you to share that somehow on Facebook or whatever. So this is from a 6th grade class in Spencer, and all those little stickies represent the one small thing that all the students did. So I feel like one of our major accomplishments with K through 12th graders was back in 1987 when we commissioned the Joffrey Ballet's Nutcracker. And so every time it was performed, we auditioned and then rehearsed with young people from the community, and then of course they were in the performance. And this is the first year, in 1987, and we've added up over the years, I think over 400 Iowa children have danced with the Joffrey. But that's only Iowa kids, and then you think about in Washington, D.C., you think about in Cleveland, you think about in St. Louis, you think about in Los Angeles, Chicago. Hancher has responsibility for over probably several thousand kids dancing with the Joffrey. And I'm just going to give you a sneak preview into next year, is that I'm taking a group of donors this weekend to Chicago, because this will be the last year for our Nutcracker. But there are plans for something grand next year with a new Nutcracker. That's all I'm going to say. So I just have one quick little story now about K through 12, young people in Hancher, and then I'm going to talk about Iowa communities and how we reach them, and we'll continue to reach them. Does anybody know the name Alex Coe? Alex Coe is he's 20 years old now, but he grew up in Iowa City. And he took lots of dance when he was in Iowa City, and he went to Hancher a lot. And so he ended up landing a role of Billy Elliot on Broadway. How many of you have seen that show? It's an amazing show and an amazing role. I mean, that's a demanding role. I think when it was on Broadway, they had 4 or 5 Billies because it was just such a difficult role to play. And so it was about 6, 7 years ago, I took a group of donors to New York because we wanted to see him perform. And he was going to perform on Sunday. So on Friday night, we had a little gathering in our suite with Alex. And so I introduced him and I said, Alex, would you speak a little bit to the group? And I never said this. I never coached him or anything, but he stood up and the first thing he said is, I want to raise money for Hancher Auditorium. And I said, wow, this little guy, he's great. But then he went on to say, he said, I'm here today because of Hancher Auditorium. He said that my mom would take me to Broadway all the time, and he said, I knew that's what I wanted to do. So he said, I love Hancher, and I love Alex. So these are the Iowa communities, and this is not up to date, that Hancher has touched over the years. And we've been doing it for a long time, and I really feel like we've not told our story very well, but we have relationships across the state that are very, very deep. I've kind of gotten to the point that I like to go to a lot of the same communities and really deepen that relationship, because it's not easy when you go 300 miles from here and you try to do a project, but when you've got great friends 300 miles from here, you can count on them, because a successful project happens when you've got great partners. So there again, back to the Joffrey, one of our most successful, and Linda mentioned this, and I'll say adventures, because this was an adventure, was in 2007. This is with the Joffrey, and nobody, I got to tell you, nobody's been crazy enough ever to do this, but to do 5 outdoor performances in succession, you know, in a row. It was 9 days. I was so glad it was 2007 and not 2008 with the weather. But this was in Des Moines, and we went from Des Moines to Council Bluffs to Muscatine to Cedar Rapids to Iowa City. And it ended up being a 12 semi-sized vehicle entourage. Took 2.5 years to logistically figure it out, 2.5 years to raise the money, but we reached over 35,000 people, and I'll bet most of those people had never been exposed to ballet before. And one of the biggest challenges that we had was dressing rooms. You think about the Joffrey, you know, union company, they have all these requirements. We finally found on a hiatus from Desperate Housewives in California, and we moved the trailers from there to Iowa, and the Joffrey loved it. They had such a good time. But there were so many stories from this. I'll never forget the woman in Des Moines. She said that during the whole performance, her son and her daughter, very young, were just keep on pulling at her hands, and they were so excited. And she said at the end, she said, now I don't have to feel bad about my son being the only boy in ballet class, because he's seen the world's finest. And then there was a couple in Muscatine, and they sat through the whole procedure. I mean, they were there at the load-in, which started very early. They were there for the rehearsal, they were there for the performance, and they stayed till like 2 a.m. for the loadout. And somebody, I wasn't there, but somebody asked them, and they said, what's your story? And they said, we wouldn't miss this for anything. This is so magical. And then I was in Muscatine, I don't know, about a month ago at the Rotary Club presenting a program, and this woman, I spoke about this, and this woman stood up, and she's lived in Muscatine her whole life, and she said, Chuck, I have to tell you that that's the most wonderful thing that's ever happened in Muscatine. Now, for the University of Iowa and being an ambassador, I love to hear that. That is so exciting. This was a project we did in 2009 called Journey Across Iowa, and this was a couple, Robert and Rebecca Bluestone from Santa Fe. Robert has passed, he's no longer with us, but he was a classical guitarist. She was a weaver. She does these beautiful, as you can tell, silk weavings, and she went through a bout with ovarian cancer. And so he used his music as a way to help her deal with cancer. And so they put together a project called Woven Harmony. And so we took them to, I think it was 5 communities across the state. It was Spencer, Algona, Des Moines, Grinnell, and Davenport. And what we did is we had residency activities where they went into cancer centers, they went into hospitals, and they talked, of course, to patients, but they also talked to caregivers, really trying to tell caregivers to take better care of themselves, because they're going to do a better job at their jobs. And the one story that I remember about this was in Des Moines. There was this woman who I was watching kind of the whole time. She was at every residency activity, And then she came to the performance, because we always ended up with a performance, and that was at the Des Moines Arts Center. And so I went up to her at the performance. I said, tell me your story. I said, you know, I've seen you at every one of the activities. And she said, you know, I'm an artist. She said, I'm a pianist. And she said, I used to drive by the Stoddard Cancer Clinic in Des Moines. And she said, I never thought I'd ever have to deal with anything like that. And she said, I got breast cancer. And so she said, I just quit playing my piano. You know, I didn't want anything to do with it. I was just so distraught and so upset. And so she said friends encouraged me when they saw this journey across Iowa with this Robert and Rebecca Bluestone to go to these activities. And so she said, I went to that first activity, and she said, you know what? She goes, I went home and I played my piano. You know, talk about transformation, and talk there again about making yourself feel so good. This was Preservation Hall Jazz Band. This was in 2013. We put together a project that commemorated the 5-year anniversary of our flood and the 2-year anniversary of the flood over in western Iowa. And Hancher spearheaded this, and we connected with 7 departments across campus, and then 7 communities across the state, and all having to do with of course, floods. The College of Engineering and the Iowa Flood Center were very much a part of this. And we had workshops relating to the Iowa Flood Center in the communities, talking about current flood issues. We had STEM festivals in the communities. And then we ended up, and we worked with middle school teachers in the communities, developed curricula related to flooding. And then we ended up, Hancher came through with a Preservation Hall Jazz Band with free outdoor performances. And I got to say that almost a month before this, there was a drought. It was so dry, and I thought, you know, that's good. Well, not good, but it's at least it's not flooding. But I thought this is so odd to be coming through with this Living with Floods project when it's so dry. And then the week of our tour, it started to rain, and it rained. And our first performance in Des Moines at the Simon Estes Amphitheater had to be moved. So Living with Floods, it was appropriate. We went to the place called The Venue in downtown Des Moines. Terrence Simeon, I just threw him in there. Terrence Simeon, he's called the King of Zydeco. He's an accordion player. My wife loves the accordion. And we took him to several schools around the state. He's got a program called Creole for Kids. There again, it was Spencer, Algona, and I think it was Muscatine. And what I really was touched by on this is that Terrence and his band would play. It was about a 45-minute program, and teach, you know, young people all about Creole. He talked about the food, the history, the music. And after, I would say, 2 or 3 of the performances, I remember young people coming up to him. They were so excited. Their eyes were just so wide open, and they said, this music is what my parents listened to. This is where my parents come from, which made me realize that from Katrina, a lot of these folks moved up north into communities in Iowa. And there again, I thought about how Hancher brings people together and makes people feel more comfortable about living here. And so that's the power of music. And I was always excited about seeing those young people be so responsive. So, as Linda said, we have lots to look forward to. I can't believe what the time is. I mean, we're less than a year out now, and we're going to be opening this building. I have to say that the team of people that I have been working with, and I want to introduce Brian. Brian's here, our production manager, Brian Anstedt. But the team of people who have been working, the project team on the new Hancher, I've never worked with a team of people, except for, of course, Linda's staff and the Hancher staff, who have been so collaborative and so wonderful, from Pelley to Mortensen Construction to OPN to Kierkegaard, the acoustician, to theater project consultants. And what it boils down to, what I think it boils down to, is everybody feels the pressure because they know the reputation of Hancher. They know how Hancher is loved, and they want to do the best job possible. So they listen to each other, and they really are respectful of each other because, like I said, they want to end up with the best product that we can possibly end up with. This happened, 2010 is when we chose Pelley. Or excuse me, 2009, and then 2010, the next year, I went to a conference in Dallas. And this was a conference about organizations like, presenting organizations like Hancher, like civic centers, like auditoriums. It was all about the building and the operations. It wasn't about the programming. So we had just selected our team, There were a lot of architects there. There were a lot of theater consultants. There were a lot of acousticians. And I presented on 2 panels, and throughout the whole weekend, people were coming up to me and saying, you know, I wasn't chosen for that Hancher job, but we're going to follow that through to the end, because Hancher is a special place, and it's really recognized nationally. So Caesar Pelli was so excited about this site. He said typically he has a small 2-3 block metropolitan area, and he said that he could sprawl here. He loved the setting. So he calls it a curved piece of architecture placed so strategic in the landscape to get the most wonderful views. The skin of the building is what they call a brushed steel. There are 14,000 pieces put together almost like a puzzle. And we're about 65% of the way done with the skin. November was a big time for milestones. The hardscape and landscape was finished. The scaffolding went down in the theater, and now it's in the cafe area. The roofing was done. Now they started on the terrazzo floor, which is going to be quite beautiful. On the outside, you can see that there's a cypress wood, and that cypress wood continues on to the inside of the building. Caesar really wanted to bring the indoors and the outdoors together. This is the cafe, and I should have mentioned the terrace. The terrace on the outside is going to be 6 months out of the year. We're going to be spending a lot of time out there. I want to mention that this cafe is going to be used. Nate Kading has been working with us, and we're going to establish what we're calling a culinary arts experience, where we're going to have restaurants from the community up there preparing dinners, and we're going to sell tickets in advance. We're going to have hopefully Thursday nights open, where regardless of an event, the cafe will be open. People can come up and have a drink and have an appetizer. I want this to be everybody's living room. I really want everybody to squeeze everything they can out of this, because first of all, we've all waited so long, but secondly, it's going to be such a beautiful, elegant building. And then the theater, as you heard from the video, 1,800 seats. The original Hancher was 2,500. And when I stand on that stage now, Dennis Jordan is here from Mortensen. I don't know how you feel about it, Dennis, but that stage, you feel the intimacy of that theater. It is, you stand there and you realize how the artist is going to feel on stage. And I always crossed my fingers in the old hall when I said this. I said, every seat's a good seat. And you know, some of those seats way in the back weren't so good. But every seat in this new theater is going to be fabulous from the standpoint of hearing and seeing. When we came up with 1,800, the architect said we'd hit a sweet spot architecturally, aesthetically, and acoustically. And it's going to be a little gem of a theater. So I have 2 more little stories. Oh, first of all, I want to say that I mentioned we're going to open in September. The staff is busy building the operations of the theater as the theater is being built. But all I'm going to say about the opening, and this goes back to this theme that Hancher is for everybody, is that we're going to have open houses. It's going to be the 2nd weekend of September. It's actually the Iowa State football weekend. Because after you've heard today all of the statewide activities, all the friends we have, and you think about those Fridays, football weekends, all those cars coming from all across the state. So Friday from 4 to 7, I don't know, we haven't established the hours for sure. We'll be open Friday night and then Sunday. And I want everybody to squeeze everything they can out of it. And the reason for that is, I don't know, my Spencer friends, if you remember when Sacred Heart opened. This is this Catholic church in Spencer. And I'll never forget, as a little kid, I was so impressed because you got to go back and see where the priests live and where the nuns lived. You got to see it all. And for some reason, I remember that. So I want everybody to see every part of Hancher over that weekend. I want them to just go and get the 10-cent tour. I just want them to get everything that they really can get out of it. So I just have 2 quick little stories that I want to share. One has to do with Mortensen Construction. They're the construction managers, and they have moved a lot of people, you know, permanently here. I think, Dennis, 12, 14, yes. Something like that. And so when you move to town, you uproot your family. Most of them, I think, were from Minneapolis. You meet a lot of new people. You know, you meet your banker, your realtor, your new neighbors, you know, people at your church, you know, your kids. You meet your kids' friends' parents. You meet the principal at the school. You meet the teachers, your barber, your dentist, your lawyer, everybody. Well, I had this friend from Mortensen who said Chuck, he goes, it's never failed me yet. He said, all these new people who I come in contact with, he said, I mentioned, you know, I'm here building Hancher. I mean, he was always excited about it. And he looked at me and he said, you know what? He said, everybody has their Hancher story. And I love to hear that. I thought that was so cool. So, speaking of that, I just have one more little story. And this is a story about, oh, I don't want to give it away, so I'll have to start at the beginning. I belong to this group. It's called the Major University Presenters. And it's these presenters from all across the country. And it's the big dogs. It's like Maryland, UCLA, Berkeley, Michigan, Florida, Arizona, Arizona State, Nebraska, Illinois, University of Iowa, University of Washington, Davis. You know, so you get the picture. There's a lot of major schools. And so the presenters from each one of those schools, we get together a couple times a year. So we were at Dartmouth. Dartmouth is another. This was probably about 6 years ago. And the whole conference was about envisioning the 21st Century Performing Arts Center. And so Hancher, at that time, we hadn't chosen our team, but we knew we were going to have a new building. Out of that group, we're the only ones building a new building. But everybody else was thinking about renovating, things that they could do to bring their building up to date. So we're all sitting on stage, this stage at Dartmouth. They always try to make it theatrical, you know. So we got this big group of people, because along with the presenters, we're also theater consultants, acousticians, architects, you know, the whole 9 yards. So there are about 50 people there, and I was sitting, let me think about this, house right, stage left, and I was about where the curtain comes in. So I turned around and I looked, and oh my God, there was the president of Dartmouth standing behind me. I knew that's who it was because he was about to be introduced for the welcome. And so I turned around. I'm always proud to say, I'm from Hancher Auditorium at the University of Iowa. You know, my name's Chuck Swanson. And so he just smiled. He didn't say anything to me because I'm sure he was thinking about his introduction. So then he goes to the podium. He had his, the presenter did a great introduction. And he starts out by saying, you know, I love the performing arts. He said, I got my love of the performing arts by attending Hancher Auditorium at the University of Iowa. I get chills when I say it. And I just couldn't believe it, you know, because in some ways I'm a little dog at this, because there's a lot of big dogs at that meeting, and my buttons were just bursting. I was so proud. And then he went on to say that he had grown up in Muscatine, and his father was a dentist, and his father would take him, and mother would take him to Hancher all the time. And get this, now he is president of the World Bank. Jim Young Kim. He was at Dartmouth, and President Obama stole him away. But you never know when Hancher's going to fall into your life and how it touches people. So I've got more stories, but I better quit. So, questions? Any questions? No questions.
Talk a minute about the construction crew and what your plans are for them.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Bob. Bob wants to know about the construction crew and what our plans are for them. Well, first of all, getting it done, Bob. That's the main thing. That's the main thing.
They're out there on Sunday.
I know. They're doing a great job. But they are going to turn over the keys to us June 1st. I didn't explain all that. And from June to our opening in September, I say we're going to play with it. You know, we're going to have time to be able to do some what they call soft openings, some events that we can do to practice. Because you think about the box office, you think about Brian and the production staff, the lights, the sounds, I mean, they've got a lot to learn and a lot to not only learn themselves, but to teach, because I go back to those student employees. And so, Bob, what we're going to do is we are actually going to have a hard hat performance, a thank you performance. They got to get it done first, but for all the workers, and that's already scheduled at the end of August. And what I love about this is, I don't know how many know Mark Nolte? Mark is the head of ICAD, the Iowa City Area Development. Well, I was talking to Mark once, and he came and he said, oh, I want to have a meeting in the new Hancher. And I said, well, you know, let's think about this. And so then he went on to say that part of his job, of course, is recruiting businesses. And he said it's really tough because, but it's a good thing, we have low unemployment here. But people who come here want to find workers. And so we talked further, and, you know, Hancher is a great example of recruiting and retaining workers. And so I said to Mark, I said, let's, with our hard hat performance, let's have your meeting. I said, let's bring the two together and have Hancher as a great example of how a success story of how things happen. So August 26th, is that right, Dennis? I think. Yeah, that's the date. So, and we're going to have tickets, reserve seats, because our ushers and our box office have to practice. Like I said, a practice swing, because we got to check things out. I always worry about 2 tickets being sold for 1 seat. You know, it's something crazy happening. And the new Hancher is a little more complicated. The old Hancher, or the original, I hate to say old, but the original Hancher was 6 ways you could go into the theater. There will be 12 ticket-taking spots in the new location. So it's a little more complicated, but it's going to be a beautiful, beautiful place. So yes?
I'm just curious, is the box office going to be in Hancher again?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. The box office though is going to stay at I always say the Orange Julius place, the old Cap, till we open. Really, till about the first part of September. Yeah, and they're gonna be there because there again, Hancher is different. The original box office, there was a foyer. You could close it off. You go into the box office and you're into the whole building. So we're going to wait until we open. Yes.
I walked in a few minutes late, but did you announce the 2016?
No, no. We will in April. That's a very good question. Everyone wants to know what that opening event is. Somebody has already asked for 150 tickets. They don't even know what it is. I'm looking at him right now. So no, we will announce in April. Yeah, we're still working on it. It's challenging, and it goes back to what I said at the very beginning: is the fact that, you know, there's a lot of excitement and there's going to be a lot of hoopla, and you want to do it right. We're trying to be very careful about it. Another thing too that I think is so interesting about this opening is that we have so many years to honor in terms of the history. So I think this is a great little story too, is that Special Collections, I can't say enough great about them. Over here at the university libraries, they are wonderful people. And they, we're hoarders. We keep everything. So from day one, all the posters, all the press, everything is just, I don't know, it's amazing. So Tim, our receptionist, he has been working with Special Collections, transferring everything over to Special Collections. And they've been so gracious and so wonderful. And they're going to digitize all this and catalog it so people can go then and research. You know, find from any year, you know, if they want to look up an artist or performance they went to. So what we've been talking to them about, because we're going to have monitors throughout the new hall, is that we want to create some video and capture a lot of that wonderful history. And I think especially during the open houses, that would be that'd be terrific. How many of you read the article about the Steinway? Yeah, I'll tell you that was one of the most, like I said, I have 3 daughters, and so their births and my wedding was great. But that day was one of the most wonderful days of my life. That was really something, watching Richard and Hal. And then you think about Emanuel Axe being a part of this. You know, Emanuel Axe, how many of you have seen him perform at Hancher? And what's so incredible about it is Richard has turned pages for him about 6 times. And so just in that room, the history, it was a selection room. There were 5 Steinways. And in that room, I just tried to figure out the number of years of history, of Hancher history in that room. It was so emotional. We got in the car. My wife was along. This is so funny. I don't think she'd mind if I told this, but we're in the car after we made the selection, and that day had so much emotion to it. And my wife looked at Richard and Hal. She goes, "Oh, you guys, it's like you've had a baby today." And it was such a special day. And then we would go to restaurants that weekend. And I would tell, because we had great waiters in Manhattan, and I would tell them, you know, Richard and Hal, what they had done, you know, help with this purchase of this Steinway. And so they all treated him so special, but one waiter looked at my wife and he said, "I don't even know what a Steinway is," you know, but he knew it was special. And so, but that day was, and Steve Carver, for those of you who know Steve is a star. He was a piano tuner for years at the School of Music, so he tuned our pianos. And then Juilliard stole him away. And so he goes to the Steinway factory and everybody's, "Oh, hi, Steve. Hi, Steve." I mean, he's amazing. And of course, Emanuel Axe too, they all were enamored with him. But he brought it down to 2 and then he let Richard choose the final one. So it was just and like we say, one step closer to the new building. You know, you gotta have a concert grand piano. So, and then, I don't know, just so many wonderful stories about so many want to talk a little, just quick about some of the construction workers. We had a safety luncheon. Everybody speaks about safety. Safety is Mortenson's #1, and that's safety and quality, and that's very important. So there was this lunch with, I don't know, about 300 of the construction workers. And so I was there and just spoke for a little while, and then I went to sit at a table and sat with a bunch of, I ended up being electricians, and they were all from Honduras. And they said to me, you know, it was so lovely talking to them. One of them said that, and then I found out that they all were here for 6 years. They send their money back to their country, to their family, but they're not going to see their family for 6 more years. And none of them knew each other when they came. And they're sitting together, and they found out, of course, met each other, how close they are to each other in Honduras. And so I said to one of them about his family, and he looked at me and he just pointed to everybody around the table. He said, "This is my family now." You know, so there's just so many individual little stories. And just every time you go, in addition to the building, you find this humanistic part to it. And what I love about it too, and Dennis, you could speak to this more than I could, they all know the significance of what they're doing. I mean, they feel it. Don't you think that, Dennis?
I agree.
Yeah, they really, really do. It's not just a job. And it's very, as Caesar Pelli said, it's so complicated. It's like building and crafting a Stradivarius or a Steinway. You know, it takes a long time, but yet you go over there and you see all the coil, all the wiring, all that. There's masters over there doing that work, you know. But at the very end, it's important that we all use it right. And we all, of course, come to performances. We all support performances, and we talk a lot about Hancher, you know, and the University of Iowa. So, and thanks to President Boyd, he really did so much with Hancher. You know, I mean, he's always been there. Our 30th anniversary, we didn't have a president, and I remember Sandy standing out there on stage with Judy and myself, and he said something about the 50th anniversary. He knew he wouldn't be there doing this, you know, but he's always been such an advocate of the arts and Hancher and the university, and we really appreciate that. So, thank you. Excuse me.
Chuck, thank you so very much. We all love Hancher. I remember bringing my son, who couldn't sit still for 2 seconds, to the Nutcracker many, many years ago, and he still talks about it at Christmas time. And he sat through about an hour and a half without moving a muscle, so he was totally mesmerized by it. I want to thank you all so much for coming today to our last Lunch and Learn of this particular semester. And we will be letting you know about what the upcoming events are. You can go to social media or our website, which is outreach.uiowa.edu. And we'll have the list of all of the speakers who will be appearing here in the next semester. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you again, Chuck.